The last thing we expected that morning was police lights flashing outside our home. My wife and I had just finished breakfast when two officers pulled into our driveway like we'd robbed a bank. Turns out, HOA Karen had called the cops again. But this time, she wasn't just complaining about our fence color or the bird feeder. No, she claimed we were criminally ignoring a fine she slapped on us for not trimming a bush, exactly 3 inches below the mailbox. I wish I was joking. Karen, our self-declared HOA president, had made it her personal mission to micromanage every inch of our property. This time, she was ready to escalate things and apparently thought a police report would scare us into obedience. But here's the twist she didn't see coming. My wife isn't just any homeowner. She's a sitting judge, and she knows the law like Karen knows how to write passive-aggressive emails. As the officers walked up, Karen strutted over in full HOA glory, arms crossed, already grinning like she'd won. "Arrest them," she demanded, pointing at us like we were fugitives. But when one of the officers glanced at my wife's ID badge, everything changed. What happened next had Karen absolutely speechless. It wasn't just the badge that stunned her. She had no idea what kind of storm she'd just walked into. But the best part? We hadn't even gotten to court yet, and Karen. She was about to wish she'd never picked this fight. The officer took a closer look at the badge, my wife, calmly handed over. His expression changed, just a flicker, but Karen caught it too. She stepped back, her voice suddenly not as loud. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, trying to play it cool. My wife didn't say a word. She just looked at the officer, then at Karen, like she was giving her one last chance to back down. But if you know Karen, you know backing down isn't in her vocabulary. This wasn't the first time she'd weaponized the HOA a couple of months back. She'd fined us for having a garden gnome in the front yard, said it was an unauthorized, decorative element. Then it was the porch light being too bright. And once she even complained about our car being too red for the neighborhood aesthetic. Each time we complied just enough to avoid the headache. But this time, she took it way too far. The so-called fine she issued wasn't even real. It was never voted on by the board, and most of the neighborhood didn't even know about it. But Karen, with her clipboard and attitude, acted like she ran the place. And now she wanted to use the police to scare us into writing a check for something that had no legal standing. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that my wife wasn't just going to let this slide. And when we started pulling the HOA records, things got even uglier. The officers asked to speak privately, and we stepped aside, leaving Karen standing there with her arms still crossed, trying to look confident. But she kept glancing over, clearly uneasy. My wife explained everything calmly, how the fine was bogus, how Karen had no authority to issue it, and how the HOA board hadn't even approved any such penalty. One of the officers nodded slowly, flipping through the papers Karen had handed over. "This isn't an official citation," he said under his breath. Back at the house, I started digging through our HOA documents while my wife stayed outside. We'd kept every newsletter, every email, and every notice sent over the past 2 years. It didn't take long to realize something strange. The so-called fine Karen issued wasn't mentioned in any meeting minutes. In fact, there hadn't been a board meeting in months. I called up Mr. Delgado, one of our neighbors who used to serve on the HOA board. He was shocked. "That wasn't approved by anyone," he said. "She's making things up again." Meanwhile, Karen was still trying to talk circles around the officers, insisting we were setting a dangerous example for the neighborhood by not paying her fine. But her voice was losing that sharp edge. She could feel the walls closing. Even if she wouldn't admit it yet, what none of us knew at the time, though, was that this so-called fine was just the surface. Because when we looked deeper into the HOA's finances, something really didn't add up. I printed everything I found and laid it across our kitchen table eames. budget reports, payment notices. My wife, still in her blazer from work, leaned over the pages, brow furrowed. "This doesn't make sense," she said quietly. "These numbers don't match what was sent to homeowners." Karen had been collecting fines, fees, and voluntary donations for over a year, but there was no record of where that money went. Thousands of dollars were unaccounted for, and the HOA's official records were either missing or altered. The more we looked, the worse it got. Whole meetings had supposedly taken place, except no one we talked to even remembered being invited. A few neighbors came over that evening when word started spreading, and when they saw the documents, their reactions were the same: shock, confusion, and then anger. Karen had somehow taken control of the HOA's books and had been operating like a one-woman government, handing out fines, sending warnings, and even approving her own reimbursements. Back outside, Karen was still pacing around, talking on her phone. When she saw some of the neighbors gathering in our yard, she froze for a moment. She could feel the shift happening, the power slipping. But still, she didn't leave. Instead, she marched right back up to our porch, waving a stack of papers and shouting something about legal authority and HOA violations. The officers tried to calm her down, but she was too far in. And then, just as the tension peaked, my wife stepped forward with one document that changed everything. My wife held up the document calmly, but with purpose. "This is a cease and desist letter," she said, loud enough for Karen and the growing crowd to hear. "Drafted and signed by the county attorney's office, effective immediately." Karen blinked, caught off guard. "Cease and desist? What?" she snapped. My wife didn't flinch. "From misrepresenting yourself as acting president of the HOA, and from issuing unauthorized fines or notices." "You're not on the board anymore, Karen. Your term expired 6 months ago." A silence fell over the yard. Even the officers looked surprised. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, like her brain couldn't catch up. "That's not possible," she finally said, fumbling through her papers. I sent out re-election forms. I never got removed." My wife raised an eyebrow. "No election ever took place. We checked with the county clerk." "You've been operating without legal authority on the missing funds." She glanced at the officers. "That's now part of an active investigation." Before anyone could respond, Mr. Delgado stepped forward from the crowd. "Actually," he said, pulling out his phone, "you might want to see this." He tapped the screen and held it up. It was a video, grainy but clear, of Karen handing an envelope to a contractor near the clubhouse weeks ago. Cash exchanged hands. No receipts, no paperwork. Just a shady deal, caught on a neighbor's security camera. The officers exchanged looks. Karen's face drained of color. She knew exactly what was coming next, but she still had one more move to make. Karen's face twitched as the video played. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. One of the officers stepped forward and quietly asked her to sit down while they made a few calls. The crowd of neighbors stood still, watching everything unfold. My wife handed the officer the full binder of documents we'd collected, proof of forged notices, fake meeting minutes, and unapproved expenses. Karen had built a house of cards, and it was falling fast. Within minutes, the second officer got off the phone with someone from the county auditor's office. "They've been looking into HOA complaints in this area already," he said. This just pushed it over the edge. Karen sat on the porch step, no longer yelling, no longer in control. For the first time, she looked small. The officers didn't arrest her right then, but they informed her she'd be contacted by investigators soon, and that she was to stop all HOA-related activity immediately. Neighbors clapped, some nodded silently, and a few shook their heads in disbelief. After all her noise, Karen was finally quiet. But just when we thought it was over, one of the neighbors, an older man who rarely said much, spoke up. "There's something else," he said, pulling out a faded envelope. "Karen's been charging me a monthly maintenance fee in cash for nearly 2 years." He opened the envelope. Inside were receipts all handwritten, all signed by Karen. My wife looked at me. This might be bigger than just our neighborhood. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. County investigators showed up, interviewed neighbors, and started digging into years of HOA financial records. Turns out, Karen had been running her little side hustle far longer than anyone realized, collecting fake fines, charging off the book fees, and using HOA funds for personal expenses, including a weekend spa retreat she listed as a board strategy session. Needless to say, no one else was invited. With the evidence stacked against her, Karen quietly stepped down from everything, claiming health reasons and avoiding most of the neighborhood. A new, legitimate HOA board was elected with actual transparency and open meetings. People who'd once avoided speaking up were now more involved, sharing stories and helping review old records. It was like a fog had lifted over the community. As for my wife and me, we didn't press charges ourselves. We didn't have to. The legal system was already in motion. And funny enough, the same judge Karen once tried to intimidate in her own driveway ended up being the one whose actions helped clean up the entire neighborhood.